Loops are used to execute the same block of code again and again, as long as a certain condition is met. The basic idea behind a loop is to automate the repetitive tasks within a program to save time and effort. PHP supports 4 different types of loops: the while loop, do while loop, for loop, and for each loop. Let's take a look at each one of these. So let us begin with the while loop. So let's go ahead and open up our PHP tags. And we will be doing a while loop first. So the first thing we need when doing a while loop, we need what is known as a counter. So we can set our counter, and let's call our counter x, and we'll set x equal to 1. So this is our counter. And then we'll use the while keyword. So while, and then x is less than or equal to 10. We are going to echo the following string, and we can say the number is, and we can even include our variable within our echo statement. So we can just simply put x here and then a break. And then what we need to do next is to increment our counter. So we can increment by 1. So this is the same as x equals x plus 1. All right, so this is the equivalent for x plus plus. And let me not forget my semicolon. Right, so now let me save this and come over here and refresh my directory. And we are now doing loops.php. And we see that, oh, we got x printed out. All right, so in order to fix this, we actually need to use our double quotation. So this is one of the main differences with the single quotations and the double quotations. So the single quotations will print exactly what is in there with what is in the string body without evaluating what is in there. And with the double quotations, it will now evaluate x and transform x. Instead of printing x, it will actually print the value of x. Right, so let us save this and refresh. And we see here we get the current value of x. All right, so this is a while loop in action. It starts at 1 because the counter has already been set to 1. And it is incrementing by 1. Now, if we wanted to increment by 10, for instance, we could say x plus equals 10. And this would be equivalent to x equals x plus 10. And save it. Okay, what did we do wrongly here? Let's see what we did wrong. Okay, we need to set this to a larger number. So let us say while x is less than or equal to 100 and save it. Right, so now we see that x starts at 1 and increments by 10. And of course, if we wanted it to start by 0, we'd simply set our counter to 0. And it would print everything from 0 to 100. So to explain this while loop again, first we have to initialize our counter. And in this case, our counter is x, and we have set the value to 0. Then we have to evaluate what is within the parentheses, And we're saying continue the loop as long as the value of x is less than or equal to 100. This is the while block, code block to be executed in our loop. And we're simply echoing out the number is and the actual value of x. And remember, we have to use our double quotations to evaluate the value of x. And then we're incrementing x by 10. Now let's test out how to do a do while loop. So let me actually move this. This is our while loop. And I'm going to comment out everything here. And we're now going to do a do while loop. And we're going to set our counter back to 1. So with our do while loop, we begin with the do keyword. And then following that, we have our block of code and then our code to be executed. So we want to execute the number is, and we can put x and then a break. And then let's say x plus plus. And then after that block of code runs, we want to then do our evaluation. So that's the difference between the while and the do while loop, right? The do while loop will always execute the block of code once, and then it will check the condition. It will then repeat the loop while the specified condition is true. All right, so in this situation, we want to say while x is less than or equal to 10. And let's end with our semicolon. So let us save this and run it. And we have a syntax error in line 16. Oh, we need to ensure we have our $. So refresh, and we can see here now the number is 1 and it counts all the way through 10. All right, so remember the do while loop condition is tested after executing the statements within the loop. So for instance, let us say that for our counter value, it was a value of 11, right? So let us save this and run it. We see here that the code block still executes at least once and then does the check. And then it sees that x is already greater than 10, so it does not choose to execute the loop anymore. So that's the main difference between the while and do while loops. The do loop will at least run the code block once before doing the evaluation, and the while loop will always evaluate first before executing the code within the code block. Now let's take a look at the for loop. So the for loop loops through a block of code a specified number of times. And we usually use it when we know in advance how many times the script should run. So let us look at how to set up a for loop. So let me comment this out, set my counter back. Let's actually set it to 0. So first, actually we can comment out this for now, or we can leave it. So I'm going to show you how we can use a counter. So I'm going to declare a new counter for my for loop inside my parentheses. So I'm going to use I and set I equal to 0. And then we're going to say while I is less than or equal to 10, we want to increment I by 1. And then inside we can echo the value of I is, and I. All right, so as we said, once we know the exact number of times the script should run, then we can use a for loop. So first we have our counter that we initialize. Then we have our test counter to test, do our check to see the value of the counter versus how many times we want to run it. And then we have our increment counter. So let us save this. We can comment this out for 1 second. So let's save this and refresh our page. So we see here the value of I is 0 through to 10. So it works pretty much the same way or similar way as a while loop. Only thing, the syntax is a bit different. So if we want to increment by 10, oops, and let us stop this. That's an infinite loop, by the way. So that's something we never want. Let me press back. So the reason for that is I did not give this an equal. So we got caught in an infinite loop there. So ensure that you have the proper syntax. So refresh. Let us click on loops. And we see here that we are now incrementing by the value of 10. Let's now take a look at for each loops. So let me just put my comment here, and now let's comment this section out. So now we need to look at our for each loop. And for each loops pretty much work on key value pairs, usually in arrays. And essentially it loops through a block of code for each element in an array. So first, before we implement our for loop, let us set up an array. And let us set up an array of colors equals, and let's choose some colors. Red, blue, green, and let's say violet. So we have an array of colors, and now we'll use our for each loop to loop through this array and print each value. So the syntax for a for each loop is of course for each, and then we will need our colors array, and we can store them in a temporary variable called value. So for each colors as value, so each one of these items or elements in our array will be stored temporarily in value. And once we loop through, we can echo and say, let's just print the value. So let's say value and put a break. All right, so let's save this and refresh our page. And we see here that each value of our array has been printed out. Okay, so there is also another way that we can print values in an array. So let us just create another one, and let us call this one person. And let us store some key value pairs. So first person is Peter, and we can use this arrow notation to store a key value pair. So let's say Peter is 35. And then let's say Jane. Let's say she is 26. And then we have Teresa, and she is 45. And let's end with our semicolon. And let us do another for each loop. And let's say for each, and we want person as, and let us store person inside P, and then use our arrow notation val. So this type of for loop is really just an extension of the first one that we did. And so let us open up our function or loop body and say echo. We want to echo P equals the val, and then do a break. So remember, we're storing key value pairs in our array, and we are going to print our key value here. And let us, instead of equal, say is. And let's save this. Let me comment this one out for now and save it and refresh. And we get Peter is 35, Jane is 26, and Teresa is 45. All right, so before I wrap up, I want to briefly touch on the break and continue keywords or statements that can be used within loops. And we've already seen the break statement used earlier when we did our switch statement example. So the break statement can be used to jump out of a loop. So I'm going to demonstrate this using our for loop that we already have here. So let me uncomment it. Right, so within our for loop block, we could put a condition saying if I, which is our counter, is ever equal to, let's say, 30, then we would like to break. Right, so let us save this and run it. Right, so what this has done is as soon as our counter has reached a value of 30, it has broken out of the loop completely and ended the loop. Right, so if this was a value of 70, for instance, let's refresh. Right, so as soon as our value reaches 70, the break keyword will allow us to break out of that loop. So this condition has been met. Therefore, we can now break out of that cycle. The second keyword, continue, pretty much works similarly to break. Only difference is, and let me just type it in here and save it. And let's run it and see exactly what it does. Right, so with the keyword continue, it will break one iteration or iteration in the loop. So if that specified condition occurs and continues with the next iteration of the loop, then once it hits our condition, it will be skipped over. Right, so once I is equal to 70, it will just continue and skip over that condition. So we see here 70 has been skipped over, and the same thing would happen if we had 100. It would go all the way up to 90 and skip over 100. So that is really how break and continue work in loops. And you can also use them in your while and do while loops. So I encourage you to go ahead and try and test out the break and continue keywords in your do while and while loops.